And we have a great guest in studio. In fact, I was kind of ignoring her as you were drawing her up because I do the Larry King kind of interview thing where I like surprises, right? So I didn't want to ask her too much because I wanted her to spring it on all the listeners because it's really a delight to have her here with us because I think her message is so, so important. And since I speak in the leadership lane and she's also in the leadership lane with a great twist, it is, again, great to have her in the studio. Susan Steinbrecher, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you.
She is the CEO of Steinbrecher and Associates. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She's a business consultant and co-author of Heartcentered Leadership, Lead Well, Live Well, and one of the pioneers of the global heart-centered leadership movement. Oh, she started a movement. She's the CEO of, as I said, Steinbrecher and Associates in Hurst, Texas. She serves as an executive coach, licensed mediator, professional speaker, and leadership advisor. She is also, Ed, the author and listeners of the Amazon bestseller, Ken Show?
Yes.
Ken Show, A Modern Awakening, and the forthcoming book based on her program, Meaningful Alignment. I love that. Susan is also a columnist with Inc.com, Entrepreneur.com, contributor, and Huffington Post blogger. She has no time.
Nope.
Her work has been featured on MSNBC's Your Business, the New York Times, which is huge, Fortune, Small Business, BusinessInsider.com, CNBC.com, and CNNMoney.com. I'd like to give you your total props, so that's why I wanted to make sure everybody got the total map of Susan Steinbrecher. Again, Susan, thanks for coming here. So here's the first question right out of the gate. Why do most people struggle, and this is a tough question to answer, with authentic communication, especially during high-impact conversations?
Well, the simple answer is fear. So the point of that is people lack sometimes the confidence, competence, and comfort, honestly, to have that authentic conversation. They're not so sure about their own emotional composure and resiliency through that. And I think they're also very concerned about who they're talking to, their emotional composure and resiliency, and how that conversation is going to go. So I either avoid it at all costs or they typically plunge in and it becomes a disaster quickly.
So tell us that. So doing that, those high impact conversations, but being heart-centered with the word heart-centered leadership.
Right. So what you're doing is you're approaching the person very respectfully. I mean, we basically look at this as two ways. One is what we call the inside game, which is how do you keep composed in the middle of that conversation yourself so that you're not freaking out and things go well. And also, how do you manage the emotion of the other person? So often that is using empathy for that individual when they're expressing frustration or concern, or at least enhancing or maintaining or at least enhancing their self-esteem where appropriate. That has a tendency to calm people down, get them engaged, and then they actually want to have the dialogue with you. So those types of apparatuses, I would say, we deploy.
Awesome.
Susan, how do you, obviously those are some pretty critical skills when it comes to humanity. How do you coach someone into acquiring those skills, using your skill set to do so?
Yeah, first of all, what we do is we identify what those behaviors look like, sound like, feel like. And once they identify that, then they begin to start to practice that. And at first it will feel a bit inauthentic because they're trying something on new that maybe not be second nature. But in some cases, you have to fake it until you make it. I mean, the only way to build the skill is to do it. So they do it, they recognize how it feels to do that, what the response was from the other individual, what the impact was as a result, et cetera.
So how hard is it to get people to buy into that, though? Because you know how corporations are. We want the newest, greatest, latest. Tell us how to do this, Susan. This sounds incredible. How do you get them to make that shift?
Well, at first, sometimes people will think it's all warm and fuzzy and that it's not going to build enough profitability and everything for the business. But what we know statistically is that if you take really good care of your employees, they'll take good care of your customer. Your customer's going to take care of the bottom line. And it's when we try to shortcut that we make all the mistakes. We also know from Fortune's 100 best companies to work for, those particular organizations typically outperform their marketplace 2 to 3 times financially. So if we think this is just a soft skill, that's a mistake. There's absolutely a dollars and cents skill to this.
Yeah, I love that you said that soft skill, because now there are some soft skills that I think some companies and CEOs are realizing yeah, we should pay for this because the ROI on the backside, and you talked about this in this show, of course, CEO Money, and that's the dollars and cents of it. There is ROI in heart leadership, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. But people feel like, again, well, if we're too nice to people, or what does this mean? We don't actually fire people or hold people accountable. Well, of course, you hold people accountable. The bottom line here is that if you deliver the message in the right way, the person can listen to what you're actually saying, and you have a better shot of turning performance around. If you instead attack the individual, they're not hearing you anyway. All they do is shut down, become defensive, and you've solved absolutely nothing.
Tell us about, I want to jump ahead to something I think is incredible, and you just mentioned this briefly before we went on the air, but tell us about your meaningful alignment work.
Thank you. This is some new work that we're putting out and been piloting, and we're very excited about it because it really is about healing the social divide one conversation at a time. We're focusing primarily in the workplace because that's our specialty, leadership and workplace environment. And then from there, we'd love to take it on a more not-for-profit side of the world, if you will. But what it's about is how do you have that high-stakes, high-impact conversation that often is emotionally charged. People really lack that skill, and so we want to teach them how to do that. And we approach that in two ways. One is what we call the inside game, which is maintaining your own composure and resiliency through that interaction. And the other is how do you manage the emotion of the other person in that interaction so that you can get to alignment at the end.
Wow. And what have you seen so far as far as the results are concerned with
Actually, great results. Even though we've only been piloting this for about a year, every organization that we've gone to has asked us to come back. We've test marketed this at 3 different leadership levels in 3 different industries, and all have asked us to come back because they're seeing the results. What we're hearing is that 2 peers that were never able to get on the same page are now getting on the same page.
Wow, so 3 different leadership levels. What levels and what verticals, what kind of companies are you talking about?
Thank you, great. We did retail, we've done hospitality industry, and we did a financial organization as well. We've done frontline supervisors to mid-level leaders, and we also did C-suite level.
Wow, so there's a big difference between frontline supervisor and C-suite. So obviously there's some commonalities in what you're piloting in this past year and what you're showing. What are the commonalities?
The commonalities really are people's lack of comfort. And honestly, they're not comfortable doing this. So no matter the position you're in, okay, maybe you've gained a little bit more experience or a little bit more wisdom when you're in a senior position to have a conversation, but that doesn't mean they're skillful at having it. They'll tell you themselves that they often lack the competence to do it really well, and it gets them in trouble. So it's one of those universal things, in our opinion.
Well, how exciting for you. That's got to be exciting, don't you think,
Ed? I think it's pretty exciting.
I do, too.
You mentioned the 6 steps and emotional, I guess it's practicing the 6 steps in emotional management and techniques for a meaningful alignment. Kind of give us some ideas about that.
Yeah, thank you. So on the sort of outside approach, it's the more pragmatic process with how do I even start this conversation to how do I end this conversation? So we provide basically the roadmap. One of the first steps is to discuss the purpose for the conversation. I know that sounds really silly, but the reality is we've all been in conversations with somebody 2 or 3 minutes and we still have no idea what they're there to talk to us about. So clearly being specific about what the purpose is while you're packaging that in a very respectful way. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule today. I know you're incredibly busy. What I'm here to talk to you about is I would like to see if we can gain alignment on how to handle this project. This is an example. And the steps go from there to talking about impact, asking the person for what they think the cause of the issue is, asking the person what they think the solutions are as you're offering your own, all the way to the very end by expressing confidence in the interaction, thanking them for their time, and setting up follow-up dates. So that's sort of the pragmatic side of it.
We have 30 seconds left, and here's my curveball question. I love to ask people this.
Okay.
Susan, what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night is us not being able to have this conversation. It really is. I mean, when you think about it, it affects us personally, professionally. The stories that we have heard from people after they've come to our training saying, for the first time, I can speak to my son. I was not been able to speak to my son for 6 months. That's huge. So if we can impact the workplace and help create stronger profitability and get organizations aligned, that's a big deal. But when you take that skill at home, that's life-changing, and that's what we're really up to.
Boy, that is life-changing. Susan Steinbrecher, thank you so much, CEO of Steinbrecher and Associates. You can check her out with the .com on the end of that. It was great talking to you. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next, Rory and Infuse. Kate Delaney here on CEO Money.